I'd been running loads through the Appalachians for damn near a decade by then, crisscrossing those old mountain roads like veins pumping life into forgotten towns. Route 19 was my usual haunt, a twisting snake of asphalt that hugged the ridges from West Virginia down through North Carolina, where the trees pressed in close and the air always carried that damp, earthy chill. I knew every bend, every pull-off where you'd catch your breath after a steep grade, and every diner where the coffee tasted like it was brewed from creek water. Trucking suited me, kept me moving after my divorce, away from the empty house in Beckley that echoed too loud with memories of arguments and slammed doors. Just me, the rumble of the diesel, and the endless ribbon of road unspooling ahead. But that night in late October, something hung in the air like a bad omen from the start. The sky had gone slate gray early, and as I loaded up my rig in Bluefield with a haul of machine parts bound for Asheville, the wind whispered through the pines in a way that made the hairs on my neck stand up. I chalked it up to fatigue. I'd been pushing 16-hour days to make ends meet, what with alimony sucking my wallet dry. Still, as I eased on the 19 southbound, the unease settled in my gut like a stone. The first few miles were routine enough. The engine growled steady, and I sipped black coffee from a thermos, flipping through AM stations for company. Mostly preachers railing about sin or bluegrass tunes that scratched through the speakers. But as the sun dipped behind the peaks, the temperature plummeted, and the fog started creeping in. Not your everyday mist, mind you. This was thick, almost alive, rolling down from the hollows like smoke from a hidden fire. It swallowed the road whole, turning my high beams into fuzzy glows that bounced back at me, blinding more than helping. I slowed to a crawl, tires humming on the wet pavement, the white lines fading into nothing. Visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet, and the mountains loomed as vague shadows on either side, their ancient slopes hiding God knows what in the underbrush. I'd heard stories from old-timers at truck stops, tales of rock slides burying rigs, or deer bolting out of the fog to send you swerving into guardrails that weren't always there. But it wasn't the road that worried me that night. It was the isolation, the way the world shrank to just my cab and the endless gray shroud outside. I was about halfway through the stretch near the Virginia line when I saw him, or it, I suppose, though at the time I figured it for a poor soul caught out in the weather. A figure materialized on the shoulder, thumb extended in that universal hitchhiker's plea. Hood pulled low, coat hanging loose like it'd seen better days. No backpack, no sign he was prepared for the chill. I hesitated, foot hovering over the brake. Common sense screamed to keep rolling. These mountains weren't kind to strangers, and I'd picked up enough riders over the years to know some carried more baggage than what fit in a duffel. But the loneliness gnawed at me that night, the kind that builds after hours alone, with only your thoughts echoing back. My ex used to say I was too soft-hearted for my own good, always stopping for strays. So, against every instinct honed from years on the road, I eased the air brakes and pulled over, gravel crunching under the tires as the rig shuddered to a stop. The door swung open with a creak, and he climbed in without a word. Just a nod, barely visible under that hood, and he settled into the passenger seat, staring straight ahead like the dashboard held some secret. I caught a whiff of him right away, damp wool mixed with wet earth, and underneath something sharper, metallic, like old pennies or blood. His hands rested in his lap, gloveless and pale, knuckles raw from the cold. I waited for the usual chatter, where you headed, thanks for the lift, but nothing came. Just a click of the door latching and the engine's idle rumble filling the silence. "Rough night out there," I said, trying to break the ice as I shifted into gear and eased back onto the road. No response, not even a grunt. I glanced over, but the hood shadowed his face, and in the dim cab light I couldn't make out much beyond a stubbled chin and lips pressed thin. All right, I thought, some folks ain't talkers. I've hauled my share of quiet ones, vets with stares that went miles deep, or runaways chewing on secrets. So I focused on the road, hands tight on the wheel as the fog pressed in thicker, forcing me to lean forward like I could will the path clear. We drove like that for what felt like hours, though the dashboard clock said only 20 minutes had passed. The radio, which I'd left on low, started acting up, static crackling through the speakers, drowning out the faint signal from a station in Princeton. I'd twist the dial, chasing a clear channel, but it was like the fog had seeped into the wires, turning everything to white noise. Every so often I'd sneak a look at him. He didn't move, didn't shift in his seat, didn't call for clearest throat. Just sat there, unblinking as far as I could tell, eyes fixed on the windshield where the wiper slapped uselessly against the mist. The cab felt smaller with him in it, the air heavier, like his presence sucked the warmth right out. I tried talking again, nerves starting to fray. "Name's Harlan, been trucking these parts since 15. You from around here?" Silence, not even a twitch. The smell grew stronger, that earthy tang, like soil turned over after rain, mixed with that metallic bite that set my teeth on edge. I cracked the window a hair, letting in a swirl of cold fog, but it didn't help. If anything, it made the dread coil tighter in my chest, slow and insidious, like roots creeping through cracked earth. Memories started bubbling up unbidden, the kind you push down on long hauls. I'd heard whispers at truck stops about these mountains, old legends passed around over greasy eggs and burnt toast. Folks talked about the silent ones, hitchhikers who appear on foggy nights, remnants of wrecks long forgotten. One old coot in Wathville swore he'd picked up a miner killed in a cave-in back in the 50s, the guy vanishing mid-sentence with a warning about black lung. I always laughed it off as bourbon-fueled bullshit, the way truckers spin yarns to kill time. But sitting there with this stranger, the stories felt less like tall tales and more like echoes of truth. The road wound steeper now, climbing toward a ridge where the drop-offs plunged hundreds of feet into shadowed valleys. My headlights caught glimpses of skeletal trees clawing at the sky, their branches like fingers reaching out. The engine strained, and I downshifted, the rig groaning in protest. Still, he said nothing. I wiped sweat from my brow despite the chill, heart thumping a little harder. "You all right over there? Need water or something?" My voice sounded thin, swallowed by the cab's confines. No answer, just that unwavering stare into the fog. The quiet stretched on, broken only by the tire's hum and the occasional pop of gravel under the wheels. I started noticing little things, how his chest didn't seem to rise and fall with breath, how the seatbelt I'd insisted he buckled hung loose, untouched. Paranoia, I told myself, born from too many miles and not enough sleep. But the dread built anyway, layer by layer, like frost creeping over glass. We passed a faded mile marker half obscured by vines, and I remembered a stretch up ahead known for bad wrecks. The locals called it Dead Man's Curve, where the road hairpin turned around a cliff face slick with seepage. Years back, I'd seen the aftermath of one. A semi flipped into the ravine, cab crumpled like tinfoil, driver pinned and screaming until the medics arrived too late. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, and I gripped the wheel tighter, eyes straining through the murk. That's when he moved, just a slight tilt of his head, enough to make my pulse spike. But still, no words. The radio spat a burst of static so loud I jumped, then went dead silent, not even a hum of power. I don't know how long we rode like that, the tension winding tighter with every mile. My mind raced, filling the void with worst-case scenarios. Was he sick, high, running from something worse than the weather? I considered pulling over, making up an excuse to get him out, but the fog was a wall now, and stopping felt riskier than pressing on. The cab's heater blasted warm air, but I felt cold to the bone, like his presence leached the heat. Another glance. His hands, I noticed, were dirt-streaked, nails chipped and black, like he'd clawed his way out of the ground. The metallic smell sharpened, reminding me of blood from a fresh cut. "Look, buddy," I said, voice cracking a bit, "if you're in trouble, I can drop you at the next town, no questions." Nothing, just a fog swirling past and the distant hoot of an owl piercing the night. The ridge approached. I could feel the incline steepen, the rig laboring up the grade. My headlights caught the guardrail's rusted edge, beyond which yawned blackness. Sweat trickled down my back, and I muttered a prayer under my breath, the kind you dust off when the world feels tilted wrong. Then, as we crested the ridge, he spoke. Not loud, not even a proper voice, more a whisper, raspy and dry, like leaves scraping over stone. "Accident up ahead." My blood ran cold. I jerked my... I've been running the I-81 corridor for going on 12 years by then, back and forth like a yo-yo on a string, Virginia to Tennessee and back again, hauling whatever paid, lumber, coal, furniture, once even a load of caskets that rattled the whole way down Mount Eagle like they were trying to talk. Folks think interstate driving is all straight lines and bright lights, but once you get south of Roanoke and the Blue Ridge folds in close, it ain't nothing like that. The mountains lean over the roadway, black against black, and the exits thin out until it's just you, the white stripes, and whatever's riding shotgun in your head. That night, I was northbound out of Abingdon with a belly full of pressure-treated 2x10s, the kind that smell like creosote and wet dog when the tarps get soaked. Rain had been spitting since Bristol, the kind of cold October drizzle that finds every gap in your collar and keeps you company whether you want it or not. I was bone-tired, running on 4 hours sleep in a motel that smelled like mildew and broken dreams, and the coffee in my thermos had gone cold somewhere around Wifeville. The CB had been quiet most of the night, just the usual chatter dying down after midnight, some boy out of Knoxville asking for a radio check, a convoy of flatbeds jawing about fuel stops. I left it squelched low, more for the comfort of knowing there were other souls out there than for conversation. Around Natural Tunnel, the signal started doing funny things, little pops of static, then a voice so faint I thought I'd imagined it. I turned the knob ahead, hunting clarity, and that's when the murmurs started. Soft, almost polite, like somebody leaning in close to your ear in church. At first it was just breath, the kind you feel more than hear, then fragments. "Still running that old Pete? Divorce papers came through last March." My foot eased off the throttle without me telling it to. I ain't never been one to spout my business on the air. Hell, half the drivers out here don't even know my real name. Most just call me Red on account of the beard I used to have before the gray took over. But these voices knew. They knew my ex-wife's name, knew I'd missed my boy's 10th birthday because I was stuck in a dock in Greensboro. Knew I still kept his picture taped above the visor, even though I hadn't seen him in 2 years. I clicked the mic a couple times. "Who's walking on me?" Nothing came back but that low, overlapping murmur, dozens of voices braided together, none of them quite loud enough to make out clean. I spun the channel knob, 9, 19, 21, even the emergency 9, and it followed. Same whispers, same intimate tone, like a whole congregation praying just for me. My skin started crawling the way it does when you realize the dark outside the windshield has been watching you longer than you've been watching it. I told myself it was fatigue, maybe a blown speaker picking up crosstalk from God knows where, but the hairs on my arms wouldn't lie down. Somewhere past Marion, the rain thickened, drumming on the roof like impatient fingers, and the fog started rising off the New River, slow and deliberate, the way smoke curls out of a grave when the ground's been disturbed. I needed air, needed to shake the heebie-jeebies before I started seeing pink elephants on the hood. There's this one overpass just north of Rural Retreat, mile marker 62 or 63. Nothing special about it, just a county road crossing the interstate on a concrete bridge put up sometime in the 60s. Graffiti on the pillars, weeds growing through the cracks, the kind of place you only notice when your bladder's screaming. I clicked the Jake brake, let the old Peterbilt coast down to the shoulder, and eased under the shadow of that overpass like it was a church offering sanctuary. The rain softened to a hiss on the roof as soon as I rolled beneath the deck, and the world went muffled like somebody threw a quilt over everything. I killed the engine, grabbed my smokes off the dash, and stepped out into the dark. The air under there was wrong. Not cold exactly, but heavy, the way it feels right before a tornado drops out of a green sky. No wind, no crickets, no distant rumble of another rig, just a drip of water off the concrete above and my own breathing. I lit a cigarette, cupping a flame against nothing, and that's when the whispers came back. Only now they weren't in the cab anymore. They were all around me, leaking out of the shadows between the pillars, threading through the rebar like smoke. Clearer now, layered, men and women both, some old, some young, all talking at once, but never loud enough to argue. Watch the bridge at Fort Chiswell. He won't listen. Same as us. I whipped around, flashlight cutting crazy arcs across wet concrete and rusted beer cans, but there wasn't a soul. Just those voices, patient as sin, curling around my boots. I've heard plenty of stories on the road, every driver has, but I never put much stock in the ones about the Blue Ridge being haunted. Folks talk about the ghost convoy that runs 81 southbound around midnight, headlights with no trucks behind them, or the woman in white who walks the rest areas asking for rides to Bristol, but only shows up when you alone. I figured it was all boredom and bad coffee. Yet standing there under that overpass, cigarette burning down between my fingers, I felt the mountain itself leaning in, listening. The shadows weren't empty, they were full, packed tight with something that had been waiting a long time for a pair of ears dumb enough to stop. I tossed the smoke, ground it under my heel, and climbed back in the cab faster than a man my age ought to move. The engine caught rough, coughing like it had swallowed something sour, and when I eased back onto the roadway, the rig felt sluggish, like it was pulling more than just lumber. The whispers rode with me now, soft against the windshield, patient. They told me about a bridge collapse back in '89, how a whole convoy went into the river when the center span let go one rainy night just like this one. Told me the names of the drivers, Tommy Kilgore, Ray Breedlove, a woman named Dolores who was trying to get home to her kids in Knoxville. Told me how the state patched it quick, slapped new concrete over the scars, and changed the mile markers so nobody would remember exactly where it happened. Told me I was fixing to drive right over that same patch of rebuilt roadway in about 6 miles if I didn't wake up. I laughed at first, nervous, ugly, the kind of laugh that comes out when you're trying not to cry, and reached for the CB to call for a bear report, anything to hear another human voice. But the squelch was dead, no static, no carrier, just the whispers pouring out of the speaker like water out of a broken pipe. I mashed the pedal, letting the old Pete wind up, tack needle climbing past where it had any business being on wet pavement. The fog closed in tighter, swallowing the reflectors, turning the world into a great tunnel with no end. The engine started missing, coughing like a sick dog, and the whole rig shuddered every time I crossed a seam in the concrete. I knew these roads, knew every crack, every patch, but that night the interstate felt different, like it had grown longer while I wasn't looking, like the miles were stretching just to keep me driving. 5 miles to the bridge, 4. The whispers got excited, overlapping faster, pleading now. I caught snatches, little turn around, too late for us but not for you, water's cold. I was doing 85 by then, knuckles white, sweat running down my ribs even though the cab was freezing. The headlights caught a sign flashing past, Fort Chiswell 3, and I remembered talk at a truck stop years back, how they'd quietly replaced an entire section of elevated roadway after the collapse, how some drivers swore they CBs went haywire right before the detour signs. I'd laughed then too. Then the detour barrels appeared out of the fog like orange ghosts, a hard right lane closure I'd never seen before. I stood on the brakes, tires howling, trailer swinging wide as the whole rig jackknifed toward the guardrail.
For one heartbeat, I was staring straight down into blackness where the roadway should have been. Just a ragged drop-off into the river 30 feet below, rebar sticking out like broken bones. I yanked the wheel, felt the trailer kiss the barrels, and somehow threaded through the cones onto a temporary ramp that hadn't been there yesterday. The rig fishtailed, lumber groaning in the binds, and when I finally rolled to a stop, my legs wouldn't hold me. I sat there shaking, staring back through the windshield at the detour lights blinking in the fog, the only thing standing between me and whatever was left of that old bridge. The whisper stopped the second I crossed onto the ramp, dead quiet, like somebody flipped a switch. The CB came back to life with a burst of some driver out of Bristol asking for a road update, voice cheerful and alive and beautifully ordinary. I couldn't answer him, just sat there crying like a damn fool, snot running into my beard, thanking whatever listens to men too stupid to know when to be scared. I limped a load into Knoxville just after sunrise, told the receiver I'd had brake trouble, paid for the busted binders out of pocket so nobody would ask questions. Never filed an incident report. Some things you don't write down, you just carry 'em. And I still run 81. Bills don't pay themselves, but I don't stop under overpasses no more, no matter how bad I need a smoke. Some nights when the fog rolls thick and the CB goes quiet, I'll hear 'em start up again, soft as moth wings against the windshield, calling my name like they glad to see I'm still moving. I keep a little wooden cross zip-tied to the mirror now, and I don't laugh at ghost stories no more. Because every time I cross that stretch near Fort Chiswell, I ease off the throttle just a hair, glance at the river sliding black and shiny below, and wonder how many others are out there driving the same road, too tired or too stubborn to hear the warning.
I'd been pulling out of Asheville every Tuesday night for 6 years straight. Same run, same customer, same load of precision machine spindles and shafts headed for a plant in Maryville. The money was steady, and the route was pretty once the sun came up, twisting up through the Smokies on 40, then dropping down 129, where the dragon chasers ride their motorcycles like they trying to meet Jesus early. But on a Tuesday in November, with a full moon riding low and fat over the ridges, pretty ain't the word I'd use. That moon turned everything silver and sharp, made the pines look like they'd been carved out of bone. I left the yard at 10, thermos full of coffee thick enough to patch asphalt, a sleeve of honey buns, and the kind of quiet that only comes when your life is narrowed down to a steering wheel and a paycheck. The first hour was peaceful enough. Radio was picking up a faint station out of Waynesville playing old Hank Williams, the kind of music that makes you feel like your daddy's riding along, whether he's alive or not. Mine wasn't. Died when I was 19, rode his log truck off the side of the mountain not 5 miles from where I was driving now. Folks said he fell asleep. I never believed that. Daddy could drive 40 hours straight and still thread a needle with a 40-foot trailer. But I kept his old leather work gloves in the door pocket anyway, cracked and soft as a whisper. Sometimes I'd slip one on when the nights got long, just to feel like somebody else had a hand on the wheel with me. It started just past the first big climb out of the Pigeon River Gorge, right where the road cuts through the rock like God took an axe to the mountain. The wheel gave a little twitch, nothing dramatic, just a soft pull to the left, like a crosswind that wasn't there. I corrected without thinking. Been doing this long enough that my hands know what to do before my brain catches up. But the night was dead still. No breeze, no other rigs, not even a possum crossing the yellow line. I glanced at the mirrors, empty highway unrolling behind me like a gray ribbon. Told myself it was a tire losing pressure or maybe a kingpin starting to go. Happens. You keep rolling and you listen for the next sign. The second tug came harder. The whole rig lurched toward the guardrail, tires chirping on the reflectors. I hauled the wheel back, heart kicking once against my ribs like it wanted out. "Easy, girl," I muttered to the truck, old habit, talking to the Peterbilt like she's got feelings. The moon poured through the windshield, bright enough to read by, and the shadows inside the cab looked wrong, too crisp, like someone had drawn them with a knife. I reached to crack the wing window for some air, and that's when the cold hit. Not outside cold, inside cold. The kind that starts behind your eyes and leaks down your spine. The windshield fogged from my breath, but it wasn't just my breath. The glass clouded in patches, like other lungs were working in the cab with me. I wiped a clear spot with the heel of my hand and glanced up at the rear view. For half a heartbeat I saw it. Another hand laid over mine on the wheel. Not flesh exactly, more like moonlight on frost, pale and thin and long-fingered, the skin almost see-through. It was gone before I could blink, but the feel of it stayed. Cold bone resting against my knuckles, pressing just enough to let me know it was real. I jerked my hands away like I'd touched a hot stove. The wheel spun free for a second and the truck nosed toward the drop-off, trailer starting to jackknife. I grabbed it again, arms shaking, and wrestled us back into the lane. The engine roared like it was mad at me for waking it up. After that, it was a fight. Every curve, every straightaway, the wheel would twitch and pull, always toward the outside, always toward the edge where the mountain falls away into nothing. I'd yank it back, muscles burning, sweat running cold down my ribs. The temperature in the cab kept dropping. Ice formed in the corners of the windshield. My coffee froze solid in the thermos. I heard it crack. And every time I looked in the mirror, I half expected to see somebody sitting in the sleeper, but the bunk was empty, curtains still tied back the way I left them. Just that hand. Sometimes on the wheel, sometimes resting on the shifter. Once, I swear, it brushed the back of my neck like it was checking if I was still warm. I started talking out loud, anything to fill the cab with a living voice. Told the dark about my boy in Charlotte who don't answer my calls anymore. Told it about the time Daddy let me steer his old Mac when I was 8, how he smelled like diesel and chewing tobacco and safety. Told it I wasn't ready, that I still had miles to pay off the truck, still had a storage unit full of my ex-wife's things I couldn't bring myself to throw away. The hand didn't care. It just waited for me to ease up, to get tired, to trust the road for 1 second too long. Mile marker 27 is where the fight got ugly. That's the stretch everybody calls Dead Man's Curve, even though the signs say something. Hairpin left, then immediate right, with a rock wall on one side and a guardrail that's been replaced so many times it looks like a patchwork quilt. The moon was straight overhead now, shining down into the gap like a spotlight. The wheel ripped out of my grip so hard the skin tore across my palms. The trailer swung wide, chains rattling like bones in a box, and I felt the whole rig start to tip. I stood on the brake and yanked the wheel with everything I had left, screaming at the top of my lungs. Not words, just noise, the sound a man makes when he's bargaining with something that don't bargain back. I don't know how I kept it on the pavement. Maybe the truck took pity. Maybe whatever was riding with me got bored. The rig fishtailed, tires smoking, and somehow straightened out. I saw the rest stop sign flash past, little pull-off with a single picnic table and a pit toilet nobody uses after dark. I aimed for it like it was the promised land, locked the brakes, and slid sideways into the gravel. The trailer groaned, air brakes hissing like an angry snake, and everything went still. I sat there until the moon moved west and the sky started going gray around the edges. Didn't get out, didn't dare. Just watched the steam rise off the engine and waited for the cold to leave my bones. When the sun finally came up, bird song loud and ordinary, I walked around the truck on legs that didn't feel like mine. No damage worse than a scuff on the drive tires. No blood on the wheel. But the gloves in the door pocket, Daddy's gloves, were laid out flat on the passenger seat, fingers curled exactly like a hand waiting to take hold. I finished the run, delivered the load, told the shop foreman I'd blown a steer tire and had to nurse it in slow. He didn't ask questions. I looked like a man who'd seen something he couldn't unsee. I still pull that same route every Tuesday. Money's money. But I don't drive it on full moon nights anymore if I can help it. I'll park at the yard in Asheville and sleep up right in the bunk with every light on, radio turned loud to some preacher screaming about salvation. And when the moon gets round and bright and the mountains start leaning in close, I keep both hands tight on the wheel and I don't look in the mirror. Because sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I still see that pale hand waiting, patient, quiet, ready to help me follow Daddy down the same road he took all those years ago. I'd been running Route 60 across West Virginia for better than 15 years, long enough to know every pothole between Charleston and the Virginia line, every diner that still served biscuits thick as a fist, and every stretch where the cell signal dies like somebody flipped a switch. It ain't the interstate, it's the old road, 2 lanes mostly, hugging the Kanawha River one minute and climbing up over ridges the next, with nothing but pine and laurel pressing in so close you can smell the sap through the vents. Folks take 60 when they're not in a hurry, or when they hauling something the DOT don't need to weigh. Me, I took it because the money was cash and the boss didn't ask questions. That night, I was eastbound out of Gauley Bridge with a trailer full of scrap steel, the kind that shifts and groans every time you touch the brakes. Moon was just a sliver, barely enough to silver the treetops, so I was running on headlights and habit. The radio had gone to static an hour earlier, and the only company I had was the low growl of the Cummins and the occasional splash of a coon crossing the yellow line. I stopped around midnight at that little shell station just past Hawk's Nest, the one with the flickering neon and the gravel lot half swallowed by weeds. Place always felt like it was waiting to be torn down. The attendant was an old boy named Vernon, skinny, missing most of his teeth, talked like he was chewing gravel. I paid for 30 gallons and a burnt cup of coffee, and while he counted my change, he leaned in close. I smelled wintergreen snuff on his breath. "You watch them woods tonight, son," he mumbled, eyes flicking toward the dark beyond the pumps. "Watch has been restless, seen 'em 3 nights running, low and quiet, following anything with lights." I laughed it off, gave him the usual line about being too old for spook stories, and climbed back in the cab. But his words stuck like a burr under a sock. Watchers in the woods. I'd heard versions of that tale since I was knee-high, something that ain't quite animal, ain't quite human, living back in the hollers where the coal camps used to be. Folks said they'd watch from the ridges, eyes catching firelight or headlights, never coming close enough to see clear, just letting you know the mountains was still theirs. I eased back on the 60, tires humming, trying to shake the chill Vernon put in me. The road was empty, just the occasional reflector flashing past, and the river glinting black whenever the trees opened up. I settled into the rhythm, left hand on the wheel, right hand on the shifter, eyes sweeping the mirrors every few seconds the way you do when you're alone too long. That's when I saw them, 2 little points of light in the right mirror, low to the ground, glowing soft orange like embers. Caught in my tail lights, same way a deer's eyes shine. I figured that's what they were, deer pacing the shoulder, curious or half blind from the beams. Happens all the time. But they didn't dart away like deer do. They just kept level with the trailer, maybe 30 yards back, moving smooth and steady at 60 miles an hour. No animal runs like that, not on a highway, not for long. Long enough. I let off the throttle a hair, watching. The eyes stayed right there, never gaining, never falling back. I sped up to 65. They kept pace. 70. Still there, low and patient, hugging the white line like they knew exactly where it was. My mouth went dry. I clicked the high beams on and off, hoping to spook whatever it was into breaking cover, but the glow just blinked with me and came right back. I told myself it was a trick of the light, maybe a couple of kids on 4-wheelers running dark, or some drunk following too close with his lights off. But the road was dead straight for a mile, and there wasn't a single headlight behind me, just those 2 burning eyes floating in the black.
The dread started then, slow as creek water rising after rain. Not panic, not yet, just a cold little knot in the gut that says you ain't alone the way you thought you were. I reached over and killed the radio static, suddenly not wanting any noise but the engine. The scrap in the trailer shifted with a metallic groan as I took a curve, and for a second the eyes vanished behind the box. When they reappeared, there were 4. 2 pairs now, same height, same steady glow, running side by side like they'd been waiting for a friend to catch up. I swallowed hard and kept my eyes on the road, but every few seconds I'd glance back. 4 became 6, 6 became 8, always low, always silent, always matching me turn for turn. No shapes, just eyes, dozens of them now, strung out along the shoulder like a constellation dragged down to earth. The road narrowed after Chimney Corner, climbing up into the hills where the guardrail gives out and the drop-off is straight down into laurel hills thick enough to swallow a man whole. My hands were sweating on the wheel, and I had to wipe them one at a time on my jeans. The eyes were closer now, maybe 20 yards back, close enough that the taillights painted the asphalt red around them. I could see they weren't round like animal eyes. They were slanted, narrow, set wider than any deer or dog I'd ever seen. And they never blinked, not once, just stared, patient as sin, like they were studying how I drove, learning my rhythm. I started talking to myself, low and steady, the way you talk to a spooked horse. Just eyes, Tommy, just eyes. Keep it between the ditches. But my voice sounded small in the cab, swallowed by the dark pressing against the windows. I don't know what made me slam the brakes. Maybe I thought if I stopped dead, they'd have to show themselves. I stood on the pedal and threw the Jake brake, tires howling, trailer jackknifing hard enough to rattle my teeth. The rig slid to a crooked stop in the middle of the lane, air brakes hissing like an angry cat. I sat there breathing hard, heart hammering so loud I felt it in my ears. Grabbed a mag light from under the seat and kicked the door open, boots hitting pavement still warm from the day. I swung the beam back down the road, ready to yell, ready to fight, ready for anything. Nothing. Empty highway stretching both ways, moonlight pale on the cracks, not a single glow anywhere. Just a river murmuring below and a whip-poor wheel calling somewhere far off. I stood there long enough for the sweat to cool on my neck, sweeping the light into the trees, across the ditches, under the trailer. Gone, like they'd melted into the ground. I climbed back in shaking, locked the doors even though I never lock 'em, and eased the clutch out. The engine caught rough like it was mad at being woke up so sudden. I rolled slow at first, half expecting the eyes to pop back in the mirror the second I moved. They didn't. For 10 whole minutes the mirror stayed dark, and I started to breathe again, started to laugh at myself a little, tired old man jumping at shadows. Then I took a sharp bend by Anstead, and there they were again, closer than before, dozens now, packed tight in the trailer shadow, running silent on the pavement itself. So close I could see the red of my taillights flicker across them like fire on wet stones. My foot mashed the throttle without asking permission, and the old Freightliner lunged forward, scrap clanging like church bells in hell. The last 20 miles to the state line were pure torment. The road climbed and dipped, twisted and straightened, and every inch of it those eyes kept pace. Sometimes they'd drop back when I hit a straightaway, sometimes surged close enough I thought they'd climbed a back bumper. I stopped looking for shapes. There weren't any, just eyes glowing and hungry and ancient, watching me like a man watches a trespasser on land his granddaddy cleared. I thought about Daddy then, how he always said the mountains don't forget who belongs and who don't. Thought about the old coal towns swallowed by kudzu, the tipples rotting into the creeks, the families that walked off into the woods during the Depression and never walked out. Thought maybe those eyes had been waiting a long time for the roads to bring fresh company. I crossed the New River Bridge doing 90, trailer swaying like it wanted to fly, and the second Matthias hit Virginia pavement, the eyes winked out, all of them, at once. The mirrors went dark, the road behind me empty as a church on Monday. Dawn was just starting to bleed pink over the ridges, and the first bird of morning called like nothing had happened. I pulled into the first truck stop in Clifton Forge, hands trembling so bad I could barely sign the fuel slip. Drank 3 cups of coffee I didn't taste, and stared at the sun coming up like it was the first one I'd ever seen. I still drive for a living. Bills don't care about nightmares, but I don't take 60 after dark no more, not for double pay. I'll sit in the dark till sunrise if I have to. And when I do cross those mountains in daylight, I keep the mirrors adjusted just so, and I don't look back any longer than I need to. Because sometimes, even at noon with the sun high and hot, I'll catch a quick flash in the glass. 2 little points of orange, low to the ground, gone before I can swear they were there. Just enough to remind me the watchers never left. They're still out there in the laurel thickets and the old strip mine cuts, patient as stone, waiting for the next set of headlights to wander down their road. And I reckon one of these days I'll get tired or careless or just plain homesick for that old route, and I'll turn on the 60 after the sun drops. When I do, I know they'll be waiting, quiet and low, running smooth beside my tires, watching to see if tonight's the night I finally belong to the mountains, like they do.
I'd been running that stretch of KY11 through the Daniel Boone for so long, I could drive it blindfolded if the state ever let me. It's nothing but pine and rock, hollers so deep the sun don't find the bottom till near noon, and cell service that drops out like God himself hangs up on you. Folks in Lexington call it pretty. Folks who live along it just call it home, and they don't linger after dark. That night I was southbound out of Mount Sterling with a reefer full of box beef for a warehouse in Somerset. Temperature gauge pigged at 0, compressor humming like a hive of angry bees. I'd left the yard at 10, figuring I'd be through the worst of the hills before the coffee wore off. But the coffee had gone cold hours ago, and the Sandman was sitting heavy on my eyelids by the time the clock on the dash blinked 3:07. My bladder had been hollering for the last 30 miles, and there ain't much between Slade and Zachariah, just a couple of pull-offs with picnic tables nobody uses, and one old rest area the state quit maintaining sometime around the first Gulf War. The sign was still there, faded green with the letters half flaked off, rest area, 1 mile. The arrow pointed down a little spur of cracked asphalt that disappeared into the trees like it was ashamed to be seen. I'd stopped there once or twice over the years when I was younger and dumber, back when the vending machines still worked and the lights stayed on all night. Now the place looked like it had been forgotten by every living soul, except the kudzu. But nature don't care about your comfort, so I clicked the blinker out of habit and coasted down the ramp, tires crunching on gravel and broken glass. The parking lot was nothing but shadows and weeds pushing up through the pavement like they were trying to swallow the whole thing whole. My headlights swept across the low cinder block building, paint gone gray, windows boarded up with plywood that had warped and curled. One lone security light buzzed and flickered on a pole, throwing a sick yellow glow that barely reached the corners. I left the truck idling. Diesel don't like to be shut off when it's 28 degrees and hauling 40,000 pounds of frozen meat, and killed the headlights so the batteries wouldn't drain. The sudden dark felt thick, almost wet, and the only sound was the reefer unit thumping away and the wind moving through the pines like a slow breath. I grabbed my flashlight and hopped down, boots hitting the ground hard enough to send a jolt up my knees. The air smelled like leaf mold and cold iron. I walked toward the men's side, gravel popping under my weight, trying not to think about how the trees lean in so close you couldn't see the highway from here anymore. The door to the bathroom hung open a few inches, swaying just enough to creak. I pushed it the rest of the way with my shoulder and stepped inside. The smell hit me first, stale piss and something sharper, like old pennies. My flashlight beam crawled across cracked tile, a row of sinks with mirrors spider-webbed from corner to corner, and 3 stalls with doors missing.
Everything was coated in years of dust and graffiti that had faded to ghosts of themselves. I picked the least disgusting stall, did what I had to do quick, and moved to the sink to rinse my hands. The faucet coughed brown water for a second, then quit altogether. I was shaking the drops off when the sound cut through the quiet like a knife. A phone ringing. Old-fashioned bell, the kind you don't hear anymore unless you're in a museum or your grandma's kitchen. Clear as day, coming from the wall behind me. I turned slow, shining the light across the tiles, and there it was. An honest-to-God payphone, the silver box dented and filthy, the cord chewed halfway through like something with teeth had worried at it. The receiver dangling, swinging gentle, and the bell kept clanging, loud enough to echo off the concrete. I stood there frozen, water dripping from my fingers, telling myself it was a short in the wiring, a kid's pranking from somewhere with a crossover line. But the ringing didn't stop. It went through its cycle, paused, then started again, patient as death. I don't know why I walked over. Curiosity, maybe? Or the same stupid instinct that makes a man shine a light under the bed when he hears a bump in the night. My boots sounded too loud on the tile. The receiver was cold when I picked it up, cold enough to sting. I put it to my ear and said hello like an idiot. At first there was nothing but static, the kind that crawls inside your skull and itches. Then a voice, male, raspy, like he'd been screaming or smoking since he was 10. "Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?" I told him, yeah, I could hear him. Who was this? The words came faster, tripping over each other. Thank God. Listen, I'm broke down out here, maybe 2 miles south of the rest area. Blue Kenworth, trailer number KX4417. Engine just died, no lights, no nothing. It's blacker than sin, and I got my little girl with me. Can you wait? Can you come? My stomach dropped clean through the floor. That was my truck, my trailer number. I even glanced out the cracked window to make sure my rig was still sitting there, headlights dark, but the running lights glowing soft amber. The voice kept talking, pleading now, telling me his daughter was cold, that something was moving out in the trees, that he could hear it breathing close. I told him he had the wrong person, that I was standing right here, that my truck was fine. But he wasn't listening. He just kept saying, please wait, please don't leave us, over and over, until the words smeared together into a sound that wasn't quite human anymore. I hung the receiver up hard, the bell giving one last jangle like it was laughing at me. My hands were shaking so bad I near dropped the flashlight. I took one step toward the door, and the phone rang again. Instant, shrill, like it had been waiting for me to turn my back. I didn't answer at that time. I bolted. Out the bathroom, across the lot, boots sliding on loose gravel. The night felt heavier now, like the air itself had thickened. My truck sat exactly where I left it, but the running lights were dim, almost dead, and the reefer unit had gone silent. I yanked the door open and jumped in, slamming it behind me. Keyed the ignition, and the starter groaned slow and sickly, like the battery had been drained to nothing in the 3 minutes I was gone. The dash lights flickered, weak and yellow. I pumped the throttle and prayed out loud, the way my mama taught me when I was little and scared of storms. Finally the engine coughed, coughing and missing, then settled into an uneven idle. I threw it in gear and peeled out, tires spitting gravel hard enough to rattle the windshield. Didn't even look in the mirrors till I was back on the highway doing 70. When I did, the rest area was already swallowed by the dark, just a faint glow from that one dying light, shrinking fast. The phone rang again inside my head, or maybe it was real, bleeding through the vents somehow. But I turned the radio up loud, some preacher out of Jackson screaming about fire and brimstone, anything to drown it out. I made Somerset an hour later, hands locked at 10 and 2 the whole way, eyes burning from not blinking. Dropped the load and sat in the dock office drinking coffee I didn't taste while the yard dog wrote me up for being late. Didn't tell him why. On the way back north the next afternoon, I stopped at a little store in Boonville and asked the old woman behind the counter about that rest area. She got real quiet, started polishing the same spot on the counter over and over. Told me the state closed it in '93 after a driver disappeared. Said he'd pulled in for a nap, left his truck running, same as me. Found a rig 3 days later, door open, coffee still warm in the cup holder. Only thing out of place was the payphone receiver dangling off the hook. They tore the phone out after that, she said, but folks still hear it ringing sometimes when they drive past at night. Said maybe he's still trying to get home to his little girl. I believed her. I still run that road. You don't turn down loads when you got child support breathing down your neck. But I don't stop anymore. Not for coffee, not for a piss, not even when my eyes feel like they're bleeding. I keep a full thermos and an empty jug under the seat, and I floor it through that mile like the devil himself is behind me. But some nights, when the forest is thick and the moon is nothing but a nail clipping in the sky, I'll hear it, a faint metallic jangle coming from somewhere behind the sleeper curtain or maybe inside the walls of the trailer itself. Just one ring, then silence. And I'll catch a glimpse in the mirror of that old rest area sliding past, lights long dead, vines crawling over everything like they're trying to pull it back into the ground. I always wonder if he can see me driving away, if he knows I heard him and kept going anyway. And I wonder how many times that phone's gonna ring before whatever's waiting out there in the trees decides I've ignored it long enough.
I'd been hauling coal out of the bituminous fields around Somerset County for so long, I knew every ridge by the taste of the dust on my tongue. The money was good, and the hours were bad, which suited me fine after the divorce. Kept my mind off the empty trailer I used to pull my little girl in on weekends, before her mama decided West Virginia was better for raising a child than a man who smelled like diesel and regret. That night, I was running south on 219 with 42-ton of metallurgical sitting high in the belly of an old end dump, the kind that rides like a drunk on ice when it's wet. Rain had been falling steady since Johnstown, the kind of cold, needle-fine rain that sneaks past your collar and finds the one spot on your back that's still warm. The wipers on my 99 Kenworth were half shot, thumping out a tired rhythm that sounded too much like a heartbeat trying to remember how to quit. Route 219 ain't kind country. It climbs and drops over the Alleghenies like God got bored halfway through making Flatland and just started folding the earth however he felt that morning. Folks call that one stretch outside Myersdale the Devil's Elbow, a hairpin so sharp you can see your own taillights if you look hard enough. I'd run it 1,000 times, daylight and dark, sober and half dead, but never in a downpour with a load that wanted to slide. I had the Jake brake on low and the throttle feathered, letting the big cat growl just enough to keep the trailer from kissing my back bumper. The high beams cut 2 pale tunnels through the dark, and the trees crowded close, black trunks slick as sealskin, branches clawing at the sky like they were trying to rake the moon down. That's when I first saw the shadows. They were tall, taller than any man has a right to be, stretched out like taffy pulled too thin. They moved between the trunks just outside the reach of my lights, never quite stepping into the open, just sliding from one tree to the next, the way smoke moves when the wind can't decide which way it wants to blow. I told myself it was the rain on the windshield playing tricks, or maybe pine boughs swaying, but the swaying didn't match the rhythm of the wind, and the rain was coming straight down. I eased off the throttle a little more, letting the speed bleed to 35 coming into the elbow. My knuckles were white on the wheel, and the cab smelled like wet wool and fear sweat. One of them stepped closer. It was on the uphill side, where the mountain rises straight up into darkness. My headlights caught it for half a heartbeat, just a shape, long-armed, head tilted like it was listening for something only it could hear.
The face wasn't right, too smooth like a river stone, or like something that had been buried a long time and only half remembered how to be human. But the eyes, Lord, the eyes, burned cold and white, the way a chunk of coal glows when the fire's been banked all night. It didn't move fast. It didn't have to. It just waited, patient as bedrock, knowing the curve would bring me back around. I took the turn slow, tires hissing on the wet asphalt, trailer groaning as the weight shifted. The whole rig leaned hard, and for a second I thought she was going over, thought I'd feel the world tilt and then the long, black drop into the gorge. But the tires bit, and I came out of the turn still upright, hard hammering so loud I felt it in my teeth. I glanced in the mirror, half expecting the road behind me to be empty. It wasn't. There it stood, right where the curve straightened, same tall shadow, arms hanging loose almost to its knees. And now there were more. 3, maybe 4, stepping out from the trees like they'd been waiting for the invitation of my brake lights. I floored it. The cat roared, turbo whistling like a tea kettle, and the speedometer climbed past 60 on a road that begs you not to. The shadows didn't run. They just kept pace along the tree line, long legs eating distance without hurry, like a man walking beside a slow train. Every time the road bent, another one would be waiting at the next turn, closer each time, closer now that I could see the way the rain slid off them without soaking in, like they weren't made of anything water could hold on to. My breath fogged the windshield, and I wiped it clear with a sleeve that smelled like coal dust and old coffee. The radio had gone dead miles back. No static, no music, just a hollow hiss like the inside of a coffin. I started talking to keep from screaming. Told them about my little girl, how she used to fall asleep on my arm when I'd drive her to her grandma's on Sundays. Told them I still kept her stuffed rabbit wedged behind the seat because throwing it away felt like throwing her away. Told them I wasn't ready to join whatever they were. My voice cracked like a 12-year-old, and the shadows didn't care. They just watched, patient and hungry, the way the mountain watches a man dig his own grave one scoop at a time. The last big curve before the Maryland line is a long sweeper that drops 200 feet in less than a mile. I hit it doing 80, trailer fishtailing, chains rattling like bones in a box. The shadows were right beside me now, running level with the driver's door, close enough that I could see the place where a face should be was just a hollow that drank the light. One reached out, slow, deliberate, and laid a hand the size of a shovel blade against my window. The glass frosted over where it touched, spiderwebbing with ice in the space of a heartbeat. I felt the cold seep through, felt it crawl into my bones like mine damp. The truck shuddered, engine missing a beat, like something had tightened its grip on more than just the glass. I don't remember praying, but I must have, because the next thing I knew the road straightened and the grade flattened and the shadows fell back. Not far, just enough to stay at the edge of my mirrors, tall shadows pacing the tree line like wolves that know the deer can't run forever. I kept my foot buried till the tack screamed red and the temperature gauge started climbing. Crossed the state line doing 95, tires smoking even in the rain, and only then did I dare look back. The road behind me was empty, just wet asphalt shining under the street lights of a nowhere town, and the mountains sitting quiet like they'd never moved at all. I pulled into the first scale house south of Grantsville and sat there till sunrise, engine ticking as it cooled, hands shaking so bad I couldn't light a cigarette. Told the scale master I had brake trouble. He didn't ask questions. I looked like a man who'd seen the far side of something he wasn't meant to. I still run coal. A man's gotta eat. But I take 68 now, even though it adds 2 hours and costs me fuel. On the rare nights I'm forced back on 219, I roll the windows up tight and keep the radio loud and the hammer down through the elbow. And when the rain comes needle fine and the moon hides its face, I don't look in the mirrors anymore. Because sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I'll see 'em waiting at the edge of the high beams, tall, patient shadows with arms too long and eyes like cold fire, standing exactly where the curve will bring me back around. They never chase. They don't have to. The mountain remembers every man who ever owed it something, and it keeps its own time. One of these nights I'll be tired, or the load'll shift wrong, or the rain'll be just a little slicker, and the shadows will step all the way into the light. When that happens, I reckon I'll finally find out what a man looks like after the earth has had its say.
I've been running eastbound on I-40 out of Nashville for damn near 20 years, long enough that the hum of those Cummins engines felt like my own heartbeat. That night, I had a 48-foot dry van full of palletized paper products, reams of copy paper stacked neat as bricks, headed for a distribution center in Knoxville. Light load, easy money, the kind of run you take when the bills are paid and you just want to get home to an empty apartment that still smells faintly of the dog you had to give away after the divorce. The Cumberland Plateau was waiting for me like it always does, that long climb where the interstate cuts through rock older than sorrow itself. October had turned cold early, and the clouds hung low, swallowing the stars so complete the sky looked bruised. I left the radio off. Sometimes a man needs quiet more than noise. The first clank came just past Cookville, right where the grade starts to bite. A metallic thunk from underneath, sharp enough to feel in my teeth. I eased off the throttle and listened. Nothing for a mile, then again, thunk, thunk, like the kingpin was working loose or the fifth wheel plate had cracked. I'd hooked that trailer myself at the Georgia Pacific dock in Mount Juliet, had checked the jaws twice and tugged the pin with my own hands, solid as marriage vows used to be. Still, doubt creeps in on a dark road. I clicked the hazards and coasted onto the wide spot at mile marker 298, the one truckers call Widowmaker Bend, because the shoulder drops off sharp into a laurel-choked ravine. Grabbed my flashlight and a four-way and climbed down. The night was so still I could hear my own pulse. No crickets, no wind, just the tick of the cooling engine and a faint smell of creosote from the guardrail posts. I walked the catwalk, shining the light under the apron, kicking the tires out of habit. Fifth wheel looked brand new, jaws locked tight, no slop in the kingpin, landing gear snug. Even the airlines and glad hands were seated perfect. I laid a hand on the trailer frame and felt nothing but cold steel. Whatever made the noise was gone, or maybe I'd imagined it. Happens when you're tired. I stood there a minute longer, listening to the mountain breathe, then climbed back in and eased onto the pavement. 10 miles later, the clank came back, only now it had company, a steady drag, like the brakes were binding or I'd picked up a wrap of logging chain. The tack dropped 200 RPM on a grade I usually pulled clean at 65. I glanced in the mirrors. Nothing behind me but black highway and the faint red glow of my marker lights. No extra trailer, no shadow, nothing. Just a feeling that the rig had grown heavier while I wasn't looking. My stomach did that slow roll you get when the scale house is coming and you're praying the cat scale was kind. I told myself it was the altitude messing with the boost gauge, or maybe the paper had shifted and settled. Loads do that sometimes. You learn to live with small lies when the truth is too big to fit in the cab. By the time I hit the Monterey exit, the drag was real. The engine was working harder than it had any right to on a load this light, and the trailer felt like it wanted to wander, nudging the steers just enough to keep me awake. I pulled into the closed weigh station at the top of the plateau. Gates chained, scales dark, just a big empty lot lit by one buzzing sodium lamp. I shut it down, set the brakes, and went through the whole routine again. This time I unhitched completely, dropped the legs, aired the bags, pulled the pin, and rolled the tractor 10 feet forward. The trailer sat there quiet and normal, tongue resting on the blocks I keep in the headache rack, tires flat and even.
I walked the full length, shining the light underneath, looking for anything hanging. Mud flap, piece of tire, anything. Clean. Hooked back up, gave the pin a tug, and the jaws clunk with that satisfying clunk I've heard 10,000 times. Climbed in, released the brakes, and rolled. Didn't make it 2 miles. The drag came back worse, like I'd added 20,000 pounds while I stood outside smoking a cigarette I never lit. The trailer started pulling to the right, gentle at first, then insistent, trying to walk me toward the guardrail and the long drop into the Daddy's Creek Gorge. My arms ached from fighting the wheel, sweat running cold down my spine even though the heater was barely keeping up with the night air. I glanced in the mirror again and saw nothing. No extra lights, no shadow rig running dark, but the reflection of my own face looked wrong, pale and stretched like the glass had warped. The clank was constant now, a slow, deliberate rhythm. Clunk, pause, clunk, like something taking steps. I found another wide spot near the Ozone Falls overlook, dark as the inside of a coal mine. No moon, no traffic, just the sound of water falling somewhere far below. I didn't want to stop. Every instinct said keep moving, outrun it, whatever it was. But the trailer was winning. The steers were starting to skid on the damp pavement, and I could feel the whole rig teetering on the edge of control. I locked it up, tires howling, and rolled to a crooked stop half on the shoulder, half in the lane. Left it idling this time, hazards blinking lonely into the dark. I grabbed a flashlight and a tire thumper and stepped out. The silence hit me first. No frogs, no night birds, just a waterfall and the low idle of the engine. I walked back slow, shining the light along the frame. The trailer sat normal, but the dirt and gravel underneath looked disturbed, like something heavy had settled and then shifted again. I laid a hand on the hitch, cold, wet, like it had been underwater. That's when I felt it, a faint tremor through the steel, not the engine, not the reefer, something else breathing under the skin of the load. I stepped back to the doors, popped the seals and swung them open. Paper, just paper. Pallets shrink-wrapped tight, stacked clean to the nose. But the air that rolled out smelled like wet earth and old blood. I slammed the doors and walked forward to unhitch again. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely work the handle. I dropped the legs, pulled the pin, and rolled the tractor free. 10 feet, 20. Then I turned the flashlight back. The trailer moved. Not much, just a couple inches, like a big hand had nudged it from behind. The landing gear scraped across the gravel with a sound I'll take to my grave. I stood there frozen, light trembling, watching it settle again. No wind, no slope, just that slow, deliberate shift, like something testing how much I was willing to see before I ran. I left it, didn't hook back up, didn't even close the doors all the way. Just climbed in the cab, locked the doors for the first time in 20 years, and sat there till the sky goes from black to bruised purple. When the first gray light came, I walked a half mile to the Ozone convenience store and used their phone to call the company. Told them I'd broken down, didn't say what from. By the time the wrecker showed up at 9, the trailer was gone. Not tipped over, not dragged away, just gone. Fresh skid marks in the gravel where the legs had scraped, and the pin lying in the dirt like it had been spit out. They found the tractor sitting exactly where I left it. No load, no paperwork, no explanation. Insurance called it a ghost drop, paid off the trailer like it had been stolen by men who never existed. I never asked questions I didn't want answered. I quit the road after that. Took a job driving a forklift in a warehouse where the biggest hill is the loading dock, and the only thing that follows you is the echo of your own footsteps. But some nights when the rain comes down soft and the apartment is too quiet, I'll wake up with that clunk still in my ears, feel the drag on my shoulders like I'm pulling a full load uphill with nothing but my own bones. And I'll wonder if somewhere up on the plateau, there's a trailer rolling slow and steady with no tractor in front, weighed down by something that finally caught what it was chasing. Sometimes I dream I'm walking that stretch of 40 at dusk, looking for my own headlights coming the other way, hoping I see 'em before whatever's riding the phantom load decides it's time to hook up again.
I never liked tunnels much, but the ones on 441 through the Smokies feel different from the start, like the mountain didn't want the hole punched through it and still hasn't forgiven the men who did the punching. Most nights I could grit my teeth and roll on through, radio up loud, coffee hot, eyes fixed on the little circle of light at the far end that promised open sky again. But that November run was different from the minute I left Cherokee. The sky had been spitting sleet since the reservation line, the kind that stings your windshield like birdshot and turns to ice the second it hits pavement. I had a belly full of furniture out of the Thomasville plant, bedroom suites wrapped tight in cardboard, headed for a dealer in Gatlinburg. Light load, easy money, and I was running late after a blown steer tire outside Bryson City. By the time I nosed up toward the first tunnel, it was pushing 1 in the morning, and the roads were empty enough that my headlights felt like the only thing keeping the dark from folding in on itself. The mouth of that first tunnel always looked hungry to me, rough-hewn rock dripping with water that never quite freezes, moss growing thick on the concrete portals like the mountain was trying to heal the wound. I eased off the throttle and let the Jake brake growl low, the way you do when you don't want to wake something sleeping. The headlights washed over the wet walls and disappeared into the black ahead, and the second I crossed the threshold, the cab went quiet in a way that don't feel natural. Not silent, my engine still rumbled, tires still hissed, but muffled, like somebody dropped a heavy quilt over the world. I rolled the window up tight even though the heater was barely keeping up, because the air coming in tasted like creek stones and old graves. That's when I heard the footsteps. Not loud, just a steady scuff, scuff, scuff behind me, like boot soles on damp concrete, keeping perfect time with my drive tires. I glanced in the mirrors, nothing but tunnel walls sliding past, slick and shining. Told myself it was echo, pure and simple. Sound does funny things in those holes. I'd heard my own exhaust bounce back at me plenty of times. But these footsteps didn't bounce, they followed. When I sped up a little, they sped up. When I let off and coasted, they coasted. Same rhythm, same distance, always just behind the trailer where I couldn't see. My skin started crawling the way it does when you realize the dark has been watching you longer than you've been watching it. Halfway through, the temperature dropped hard. The windshield fogged from the inside, little beads of water racing each other toward the dash. I wiped a clear spot with my sleeve, and that's when the whisper came. Soft, dry, like wind through dead leaves. My name. Not shouted, not urgent, just spoken like somebody standing right behind my seat, patient as death. Ronnie. I damn near put it in the wall. Jerked the wheel, tires chirping on the wet lane, and the footsteps stopped dead. For maybe 10 seconds there was nothing but the low growl of the engine and my own ragged breathing. Then they started again, closer now, like whatever owned them had closed the gap while I wasn't looking. I punched the throttle coming out of the tunnel, burst in the open air like a man breaking the surface after being held under. The sleet hit the windshield hard, and the trees rushed past black and close, but the night felt clean again, alive. I laughed at myself, shaky and thin, told myself I was hearing things, too many hours, too little sleep, too many cups of truck stop coffee that tasted like battery acid. I even reached to turn the radio on, find some gospel or bluegrass, anything with a human voice. But the next tunnel was already looming ahead, the one they call Rattlesnake Hollow, longer and older, cut back when the CCC boys still swung picks for pennies and cornbread. I thought about taking the old road around, adding an hour to an already long night, but pride or stupidity or plain stubbornness kept my foot down. The mouth swallowed me again, and the same thing happened. Sound muffled, air went cold enough to see my breath, and the footsteps picked up right where they left off. Only this time, they weren't behind the trailer anymore. They were beside it.
Scuff, 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 steady as a heartbeat, running level with my drive axles. I looked in the right mirror and saw nothing but wet rocks sliding past, but the mirror was fogging too, frost crawling across the glass from the edges in. The whisper came again, closer, almost conversational. "Ronnie, slow down. We're tired." I don't remember much after that, except a fight to keep the rig straight. My hands locked at 10 and 2 till my knuckles went bloodless, legs shaking so hard I could barely work the clutch when I downshifted coming out. I blew through the far end doing 80, trailer swaying like it wanted to dance, and didn't touch the brakes till I hit the big pull-off this side of the Akanofti Visitor Center. Sat there with the engine idling and every light in the cab on, staring at the tunnel mouth shrinking in my mirrors till it was just a black hole in the mountain. Didn't get out, didn't dare. Just watched the sleet turn to snow and pile soft on the windshield till the wipers couldn't keep up. Come morning, I limped the load into Gatlinburg and told the receiver I'd had icing issues on the plateau. He didn't care, the furniture was fine. But I cared. I cared enough to spend a day in the library at the community college, digging through old newspapers on a microfilm till my eyes burned. Found what I was looking for in a thin column from March of 1937. 6 men buried alive when the Rattlesnake Tunnel partially collapsed during construction. They dug for 3 days, heard tapping and voices the whole time, but when they finally broke through, the pocket was empty. No bodies ever recovered. Just picks and lunch pails and one boot print leading deeper into a side passage that wasn't on any map. The article ended with a foreman saying the men must have tried to dig their own way out and got turned around in the dark. But the family swore they could still hear calling sometimes, late at night, when the wind moved the right way through the mountain. I still drive. A man's got to eat, and the mortgage on a house my ex-wife lives in don't care about ghost stories. But I don't run 441 through the Smokies after the sun drops if I can help it. I'll park at the Cherokee Casino and sleep upright in the bunk with the curtains drawn and the dome light burning like a nightlight. And when I have to go through those tunnels, I turn the radio up till the speakers buzz, old-time gospel, the louder the better. And I keep my eyes locked on the light at the far end like it's the only real thing left in the world. Most nights it works. Most nights I come out the other side shaken but whole. But every once in a while, the music cuts out for half a heartbeat, just long enough for another sound to slip through. Soft boot steps on concrete, patient and tireless, and my name, spoken gentle, the way a friend calls when he's been waiting a long time and don't mind waiting longer. I'll catch a glimpse in the mirror sometimes, frost crawling across the glass, and 6 pale shapes keeping pace just outside the headlights, heads turned my way like they recognize the truck. They never hurry. They know these mountains don't give up what they've taken, and they know every driver gets tired eventually. I just hope when my time comes, when my eyes finally get too heavy or the coffee goes cold one too many times, that somebody else hears the echoes and keeps rolling, because the tunnels remember, and the dark down there is patient, and 6 men are still walking home.
I'd been running that stretch of Georgia 76 for so long I could close my eyes and still see every curve, every rusted mailbox, every church sign promising hellfire if you didn't turn right at the next crossroads. It's a lonesome road after Blairsville, the kind where the mountains lean in close and the hollers swallow sound whole. Folks up here don't put many lights on their porches. They say it only shows the dark where to find you. That night, I was westbound out of Hiawassee with a load of chicken house feed in sacks, 40,000 pounds of crumbles that smelled like corn and dust even through the canvas. I'd started at 10, figuring to be through the worst of the hills before the coffee gave out. But the coffee was long gone, and the clock on the dash had just clicked over to 4 when I started the long drop into what the locals call Noontootla Valley. The fog came up out of the creeks like it does in October, thick and slow, curling around the oaks and sourwoods so the trees looked like they were floating. My headlights barely cut 30 feet, two pale cones that slid over wet asphalt and disappeared. I had the window cracked just enough to keep the glass clear, and the air that came in was sharp with wood smoke and the sweet rot of fallen apples. The radio had quit picking up anything but gospel static an hour back, so the only sound was the low moan of the Detroit and the occasional slap of a wet leaf against the windshield. I was bone tired, the kind of tired that makes your thoughts go soft around the edges, and I was counting mile markers like rosary beads when I saw the light. It was high up on the north ridge, a single yellow glow hanging in the dark like somebody had nailed a lantern to the sky. No house, no tower, no power line, just one light burning steady where nothing ought to be. I've driven these mountains enough to know there's no road up that face, not even a logging trace. It's all laurel hill and rock bluffs, the sort of place your granddaddy warned you never to hunt after dusk, because men go in and only pieces come out. I told myself it was a hunter's camp, or maybe a plane coming in low over the ridge. But the light didn't move the way a plane moves, and it sure didn't flicker like fire. It just sat there, patient, watching the road the way a man watches a creek for a trout to rise. I should have kept rolling. Every instinct I had left told me to keep both hands on the wheel and my eyes on the fog. But there's something about a light in the middle of nowhere that pulls at you, same as a scream in the night or a child's shoe lying in the ditch. I eased off the throttle and let the rig coast, tires hissing soft on the wet leaves. The closer I got, the brighter the light seemed. Not harsh like a spotlight, more like an old kerosene lantern turned up high. It pulsed once, slow, the way a heartbeat looks under skin. My truck drifted left without me meaning it to, front tires kissing the yellow line before I caught it. I laughed at myself, nerves, nothing more, and straightened out. But the laugh came out thin, like it belonged to somebody else. At the bottom of the valley, the road flattens and runs straight for half a mile beside Noontootler Creek. That's where the light started moving. Not fast, just a gentle drift down the slope, keeping perfect pace with me, staying maybe 200 yards ahead and the same height above the ground. I slowed to 40, and it slowed. I sped up to 60, and it kept right with me, floating smooth over the treetops like it wasn't bound by gravity or sense. My mouth went dry. I reached to roll the window up and found my hands shaking so bad I could barely work the crank. The cab smelled wrong now, like wet wool and something coppery underneath. I told myself to look away, to watch the road, but my eyes kept sliding back to that light, soft and steady and waiting. There's a wide spot at the creek bridge where folks pull off to fish when the water's low. I nosed the rig in there, gravel popping under the tires, and set the brakes. Left the engine idling because shutting it down felt like surrender. Grabbed my mag light and stepped out. The fog was thicker on the ground, swirling around my boots like creek water. I shone the beam up the ridge, sweeping slow. Nothing but trunks and shadows and the faint gleam of wet rock. The light was gone, vanished clean, like somebody blew out a candle. I stood there long enough for the cold to crawl inside my jacket, listening to the creek mutter over stones and the soft tick of the cooling engine. Told myself it was ball lightning or swamp gas or my tired brain playing tricks. Then the light came back. Lower now, halfway down the slope, closer to the road than before. I don't know why I walked toward it. Maybe the same damn fool streak that made me marry a woman who never loved anything but leaving. I crossed the creek on the guardrail, boots slipping on the mossy planks, and started up the bank. The underbrush was thick, laurel and rhododendron tangled so tight you had to push through sideways. My flashlight cut a little tunnel ahead, but the beam felt weak, like the dark was drinking it. 10 steps in, the light winked out again. I stopped, heart thumping hard enough to hurt, and listened. Nothing, just my own breath and the creek behind me. I turned to go back, and that's when I heard it. A soft scrape, like a boot sole on wet leaves, off to my left. I swung the light. Empty. Another scrape, closer, on my right. The fog moved wrong, curling against the wind. I ran. Not proud of it, but I ran like a scald dog, crashing through the brush, branches whipping my face till I tasted blood. Burst out onto the road, scraping my hands raw on the asphalt, and scrambled back to the truck. Slammed the door and locked it. First time I ever locked a truck door in 25 years on the road. Sat there panting, flashlight shaking in my lap, staring up the ridge. The light was back where it started, high and steady, pulsing slow like it was satisfied. I threw the rig in gear and rolled out of there, doing 70 on a road that begs you to take it easy. Didn't slow down till the valley was miles behind me and the sky started going gray over Suches. Next morning, I stopped at a diner in Dahlonega and asked the waitress about lights on the ridge. She got quiet, started wiping the same spot on the counter over and over. Told me folks see it sometimes, that one yellow glow that moves when you move. Said it started back in the 30s when a young couple went hiking up there and never came down. Search parties found their lanterns still burning 3 days later, hanging from a sourwood with no one around it. Every few years somebody else goes looking, hikers, hunters, teenagers daring each other, and the light leads them in. Sometimes pieces wash out of the creek come spring. Sometimes nothing at all. I finished the run, turned the truck in, and took a job driving local out of Gainesville, where the worst thing I see is traffic. But I still dream about that valley. Dream I'm rolling down 76 again at 4 in the morning, and there it is, one lone light waiting high on the ridge, patient as sin. In the dream, I always stop, always get out, always walk toward it. And just before the brush closes behind me, I look back and see my truck sitting empty under the streetlight, door hanging open, engine still running, waiting for a driver who ain't coming back. Some nights I wake up with scratches on my arms I can't explain, thin white lines that sting when I touch 'em. And when the fog rolls thick off the Chattahoochee and the moon hides its face, I keep the curtains drawn tight and the porch light burning. Because I know that light is still up there, moving slow along the ridge, looking for the next set of headlights dumb enough to answer.
I'd pulled into that little gravel lot off I-77 just south of Bland around 2 in the morning, bone tired and sick of fighting the wind that comes whipping down off East River Mountain like it's got a personal grudge. The place wasn't much, just a wide spot scraped out of the hillside years ago when they widened the interstate, ringed by pines so thick the moon barely dripped through. There was a single sodium light on a crooked pole that buzzed and flickered the color of old mustard, and a rusted sign that used to say, "Rest area, next service is 38 miles, but now only said, "Rest" in flaking paint. Most drivers blow right past it, the smart ones do. I wasn't feeling smart. I'd been on the road since 6 that morning out of Greensboro with a load of sheetrock headed for Bluefield, and every motel between Wytheville and Princeton was either full of pipeline workers or charging $160 for a room that smelled like wet dog. So I clicked the hazards once out of habit, eased the Kenworth in nose first against the trees, and set the brakes. The engine ticked itself to sleep, and the quiet that rolled in was so complete I could hear my own blood moving. I climbed into the sleeper, didn't even bother to pull the curtains all the way, just kicked off my boots, left the dome light on low like I always do when I'm alone, and laid back with my cap over my eyes. The wind rocked the rig gentle, the way a mother rocks a cradle when she's half asleep herself. I was drifting off, thinking about nothing in particular. My daughter's last birthday I missed, the way the coffee tasted at the Flying J in Dublin, when the first thud came. Soft, deliberate, like a bare heel coming down on gravel. I figured it was a coon or a possum rooting around the dumpsters that used to sit at the back of the lot. Happens all the time. I rolled over, pulled the blanket higher. Then it came again. Thud, pause, thud. Slow, circling the truck the way a dog circles before it lays down. Only dogs don't walk on two legs, and whatever this was kept upright. I sat up slow, heart already picking up speed, and eased the curtain back an inch. The sodium light painted everything sickly yellow, but I could see clear enough. Prints in the gravel, fresh ones, pressed deep, like whoever made 'em carried more weight than any man ought to. Bare feet. Long, narrow, toes splayed wide. Big enough my size 13s would have looked dainty beside 'em. They started near the driver's door and curved around the front of the hood, then along the catwalk, then down the trailer side. I followed 'em with my eyes until they disappeared behind the tandems. And they were still coming. Thud, thud, slow and patient, like whoever owned 'em had all night and tomorrow too. I locked the doors. Never lock my doors, not even in the worst parts of Richmond or Atlanta, but that night I locked them and checked twice. Pulled the curtains tight and sat on the edge of the bunk with the tire thumper across my knees, listening. The footsteps never hurried. They just kept circling, around the steer tires, under the trailer, past the sleeper, back to the front again, like a man pacing off territory he'd already decided was his. Every now and then the rig would rock, just a little, the way it does when somebody leans a shoulder against a frame. I turned the dome light up bright and kept my hand on the key, ready to fire the engine and run. But part of me knew running wouldn't matter. Whatever was out there wasn't trying to get in. It was letting me know it could. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time gets slippery when your heart's hammering loud enough to drown out thought. I didn't sleep, didn't even lay down again. Just sat there, sweating in the cold, watching the curtains for shadows that never quite showed themselves. The footsteps never sped up, never slowed, never paused longer than it took to shift weight from one foot to the other. I started counting them, the way prisoners count days scratched on a wall. By the time the sky behind the trees went from black to bruised purple, I lost track somewhere past 300. When the first real light came, thin and gray through the pines, the footsteps stopped. Just quit, mid-stride, like somebody turned off a radio. The silence that followed was worse. I waited another 20 minutes till birds started fussing and a semi growled past on the interstate before I worked up the nerve to open the door. The prints were everywhere. A perfect oval around the truck, pressed deep enough that the gravel still held the shape of heel and toe. They overlapped in places, like he'd walked the same path all night without once stepping off it. I followed him with my flashlight, hands shaking so bad the beam jittered, around the front, down the driver's side, under the trailer. They kept going, straight toward the tree line where the weeds started, then into the pines. The last print was right at the edge of the shadows, deeper than the rest, toes dug in like he'd leaned forward to look at something. After that, nothing. No returning track, no scuff, no broken twig. Just pine needles and darkness. I stood there a long time, feeling the mountain watch me the way it watches everything that don't belong. I've heard the stories all my life about the Melungeons and the moon-eyed people, about families that went up into the hills during the Depression and never came down all the way human again, about things that walk barefoot because shoes mean you're still part of the world below, and they ain't. I never put much stock in 'em till that morning, standing in a circle of footprints too big for any man I'd care to meet. I finished the run, dropped the load in Bluefield, and told the yard super I had family trouble back home. Took 2 weeks off without pay and sat in my trailer in Pulaski drinking coffee I didn't taste, waiting for the feeling of being watched to leave my skin.
It never did. I went back to work because rent don't wait on nightmares, but I changed the way I do things. I start earlier now, push harder, make sure I'm parked under bright lights with other trucks around, or in a guarded lot where cameras watch all night. I don't do gravel pull-offs anymore, don't care how tired I am. Most nights I'm fine. Most nights I sleep with the curtains open and the lights shining in like everything's ordinary. But every once in a while, when the wind comes down off the mountains carrying pine and creek water, I'll wake up sudden with my heart in my throat and the sound of slow footsteps circling the sleeper. I don't open the curtains anymore. Don't need to. I know what I'd see. Bare prints pressed fresh in the frost or the dust, leading from the trees straight to my door and then away again, deeper into the dark. And I know one of these nights I'll roll into a place too quiet, too far back in the hills, and the circle will be waiting. Already walked, already claimed. When that happens, I reckon the footsteps won't stop at dawn. They'll just keep going, slow and patient, until I open the door and step out to see who's been keeping me company all this time.
I'd been running US 219 out of Oakland, Maryland for damn near 18 years, long enough that the road felt like an old vein in my own arm. It's a narrow, spiteful piece of highway that climbs the Backbone Mountain like it's trying to shake you off, then drops you into the Yehokieni Valley so fast your ears pop and your stomach tries to stay behind. Folks who don't know it think it's pretty. Red barns, black cows, church steeples poking through the mist. Folks who do know it just call it the Widowmaker and keep both hands on the wheel. That night I was southbound with a load of bagged salt for a hardware chain in Thomas, 45,000 pounds that rode heavy and shifted every time I touched the brakes. Snow had started around Friendsville, light at first, then thicker, the kind that sticks to the windshield wipers and turns them into clubs. By the time I passed Keysers Ridge, the roads were white and the temperature gauge was kissing 10 degrees. I always kept a CB on 19 and an old AM/FM for company. The CB had been dead quiet for an hour. Everybody else was smart enough to be parked, so I spun the dial looking for something to keep me awake. That's when the voice came through, clear as if the man was sitting in my passenger seat. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Big Blue out of Cumberland. Anybody copy?" The accent was pure Western Maryland, slow and thick like sorghum. I grabbed the mic out of habit. "Go ahead, Big Blue. This is northbound Salt Shaker. I got you loud and clear." Static. Then the same voice again, weaker, like he'd moved the mic away from his mouth. "I'm jackknifed. Mile marker 38, southbound lane. Can't get the door open. It's cold, real cold. Somebody please." Mile marker 38 was exactly where I was. I looked out the windshield and saw nothing but snow swirling through my headlights and the faint glow of the marker sign sliding past on my right. No wreck, no lights, just empty road and black pines bent under the weight of the storm. "Big Blue, you got your hazards on? I'm right on top of you, brother. I don't see nothing." Nothing came back but a low moan, almost lost under the hiss of snow on the roof. Then the voice again, fainter. Tell Linda I tried. Tell the kids." The channel went dead. I slowed to a crawl, hazards blinking, scanning both sides of the road. Shoulders were drifted deep, but there were no skid marks, no guardrail torn, no taillights glowing in the ditch. Just white and more white. I was about to key up again when the broadcast started over from the beginning, word for word, same pauses, same crack in the voice when he said his wife's name. I felt the hairs on my neck rise like a dog smelling death. I reached to turn the radio off, but my hand stopped halfway. The plea looped again, weaker still, like the batteries were dying. I pulled over right there at mile 38, set the brakes and left the engine running, grabbed my flashlight and a flare and stepped out into the storm. The wind hit me like a slap, driving snow sideways into my eyes. I walked the shoulder both directions, shining the light into the trees, calling his handle till my voice was raw. Nothing. No truck, no tracks but mine already filling in behind me.
When I climbed back in the cab, soaked and shaken, the voice was still going, softer now, almost a whisper. Mayday, anybody, please, it's so cold. I turned the radio off then, hard. The silence that followed was worse than the pleading. I sat there till the windows frosted solid and the snow piled halfway up the doors. Couldn't bring myself to drive, couldn't bring myself to sleep. Every few minutes I'd switch the radio back on, telling myself it was a prank, a recording, some kid with a linear amplifier and too much time. But every time I turned it back on, the call was there, same words, same voice, only fainter, like the man was running out of air. Around 5:30, the eastern sky started going gray and the snow eased to flurries. The plea played one last time, barely audible, just a breath against the static. Tell Linda I love. Then nothing. Not static, not dead air, nothing, like the channel had never existed. I drove the rest of the way to Thomas white-knuckled, delivered the salt, and holed up in a diner with burnt coffee and a waitress who took one look at me and poured a second cup without asking. When I finally worked up the nerve, I asked her if she'd ever heard of a wreck at Mile 38. She got real quiet, started wiping the same spot on the counter the way people do when they buyin' time. Winter of '89, she said finally. Big Blue out of Cumberland. Jackknifed on black ice, went down the bank into the river. Took him 2 days to find the cab. Door was jammed from the inside. He tried to kick it open. CB was still keyed when they pulled him out. Recorder in the wrecker picked up the whole thing. They say on real bad nights, when the snow's thick and the wind's right, that call still bleeds through. Same words, same voice, gets weaker every year. I believed her. I still run that road. Salt's gotta move when the storms come. But I don't turn the radio on anymore between Keezer's Ridge and Thomas. Don't care how lonely the night gets. I keep the squelch wide open and the volume at 0. Most times it's quiet. Most times I make it through without hearing a thing. But every once in a great while, when the snow starts flying sideways and the temperature drops fast enough to crack iron, I'll feel the cab get a degree colder for no reason at all. I'll catch the faintest hiss from the speaker, like somebody miles away just keyed a mic and forgot to talk. And I'll find myself slowing down at Mile 38 without meaning to, staring into the trees where the river runs black under the ice, listening for a voice I pray never finishes what it started all those years ago. Because part of me knows the signal's still looking for somebody to answer, and part of me is terrified that one of these nights my own voice might be the one that finally does.
I'd been running SC 107 for so long I knew every pine tree by heart. Every place the fog settled in the low spots like milk in a bowl. Every mile marker that had been shot up by bored teenagers with 22s. It's a thin black ribbon that twists up through the northwest corner of South Carolina, climbing from Walhalla to the North Carolina line, hugging the edge of Sumter National Forest, where the mountains haven't quite decided if they're foothills or the real thing. Most folks take 28 or the interstate if they smart. I took 107 because the money was under the table and nobody asked why my logbook was 3 days behind. That night, I was northbound out of Salem with a reefer full of peaches, bound for a cannery in Hendersonville. The load had started sweating the minute we left the orchard, and the sweet rot smell leaked through the seals until the whole cab tasted like bruised fruit and summer ending too soon. It was pushing 3 in the morning when the man stepped out of the trees. No headlights behind me, no warning, just a shape stumbling onto the asphalt, one arm waving like he was trying to flag down a train that had already left the station. I stood on the brakes hard enough that the trailer groaned and the peaches shifted forward with a wet thud. My heart was already in my throat before I even saw his face. He was tall, raw-boned, wearing a denim jacket gone pale from too many washings and a cat diesel power hat pulled low. The kind of man you see at every dock and diner from here to Knoxville.
He ran alongside the driver's door, boots skidding on the damp leaves, and when I rolled the window down an inch, the first thing that hit me was the smell. Diesel, sweat, and something underneath like creek water and panic. "Buddy, thank God," he panicked, breath fogging in the cold. "It's me, Ray Gold. We left Charlotte together Wednesday, remember? You took the shortcut through here and I followed, but you never came out the other side. I've been walking 2 days looking for this damn truck." I stared at him like he'd started speaking in tongues. My name ain't Ray, never has been, and I'd left Charlotte alone, same as always. But the face staring up at me, Lord, the face, was mine if a mirror had been cracked and put back together wrong. Same jaw, same tired eyes, same 2-day beard going gray at the edges. Even the little scar through my left eyebrow from when a chain binder snapped in '09. Only his eyes were wrong. Too wide, too bright, like something inside was shining them from behind. I should have rolled on. Every ounce of sense I had left screamed to drop the hammer and leave him standing in the red glow of my tail lights. Instead, I heard my own voice say, "Get in." He climbed a step like he'd done it 1,000 times, settled into the passenger seat, and pulled the door shut with the exact same motion I use. 2 fingers on the handle, shoulder against it for the last inch. The cab smelled stronger of peaches now, cloying and thick. He stared straight ahead, hands on his knees, knuckles white. "I knew you'd come back through," he said, voice steadier now, but still thin, like it was being squeezed through a straw. Took the detour like always, past the old church camp, and the road just quit, turned into a logging trace, then nothing. Woke up walking, been walking ever since. I eased back onto the pavement, tires humming, trying to keep my eyes on the road instead of on him. The fog was thick enough that the high beams just bounced back at me, so I ran on the ambers and the grace of God. "You hungry?" I asked, because it was the only thing I could think to say. He shook his head slow. Ain't felt hungry since, just cold and waiting. We drove like that for miles, me gripping the wheel hard enough to leave marks, him staring out the windshield like he was reading something written on the mist. Every so often he'd reach up and touch the sun visor, the same spot where I keep my daughter's picture folded so many times the edges are soft. His fingers knew exactly where it was. "You still got that picture of Jessie?" he asked once, soft. "I damn near put us in the ditch." He started talking then, low and steady, about runs we'd never made together, hauling Christmas trees out of Boone, getting stuck outside Spartanburg when the blizzard hit in '03, the time we slept in the same motel in Kingsport because both our wives had locked us out for the same damn reason. Every story fit, every detail lined up like bullets in a magazine. I wanted to tell him to shut up, wanted to tell him he was crazy, but my tongue felt thick and useless. The cab grew colder, even though the heater was roaring. Frost crawled across the inside of the windshield in delicate feathers. Somewhere past the Oconee County line, he turned to me and smiled the way I smile when I'm too tired to mean it. "You always were the lucky one," he said. "Always made it through. Guess it's my turn now." I looked over, and the seat was empty. No door sound, no rush of cold air, just the indentation in the cushion still settling, slow, like whatever had been sitting there weighed more than flesh has any right to. The smell of peaches was gone. In its place was that creek water scent, stronger now, like something dredged up from deep. The truck felt heavier the rest of the way. Not much, just enough that I had to downshift on grades I usually pulled clean. Enough that the fuel gauge dropped faster than it should have. I delivered the load in Hendersonville, signed the bills with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking, and asked the dock foreman if he'd ever heard of a driver named Ray Galt gone missing on 107. He looked at me funny, then pulled a faded missing person flyer off the bulletin board, dated August 2017. The picture was mine if I'd lost 30 pounds and hope at the same time. Last seen leaving Salem with a load of peaches. Truck found 3 days later on a dead-end logging road, door open, engine cold, no footprints leading away. I still run that road. The money's too good and the bills don't care where you sleep. But I don't pick up hitchhikers anymore, no matter how familiar they look. I check my own reflection in every diner window, every restroom mirror, looking for the day the eyes staring back go too wide and too bright. Some nights, when the fog sits heavy in the hollers and the cab smells faintly of bruised fruit, I'll feel the seat beside me settle just a little, like someone's finally come home. And I'll wonder how many more runs I got left before the mountains decide the wrong man made it out last time. Because every mile feels borrowed now, and I can't shake the feeling that somewhere up ahead, the real Ray Galt is still walking, still looking for his truck, still waiting for the day I get tired enough to let him climb back in and finish the trip we started together.